Hello, good day, and welcome back to Blue Marble Photography. It's been a while since I put out any videos, any real videos of any length. Most of my videos are just going to be tutorials and that sort of thing, and so I really put out the basic stuff last year, and there's a lot of things we can get into, and I just haven't felt like there's a real need for it. There's so many photographers out there putting out content, and I just didn't want to be over redundant with everything. But this isn't about photography. It is, you know, if you're shooting video, you should know your basic photography stuff too. But this is about slow motion, and if you're like me and you like to do a lot of video, that's really where I started before I got to photography. I started with video. I loved shooting little videos, and you know, back then the resolution was horrible and everything was terrible. But I got into photography. I got sidetracked, and then about 8 years ago, I started getting into the video side of things even more than I already had been. I've been editing videos for years, since 2004. 2005. But I love using slow motion because why? Because it slows down the action. Things happen in the bird world specifically so very quickly. And if you can slow it down, it just makes the drama so much better, because we just don't see these things. Birds are on high energy. Everything happens very quickly. So the impact of a slow motion, just a snippet of something, could really add impact to videos. And so that was what I wanted to do. Lately, we've seen 4K 120, and so this is how everything ties together. 4K 120 is an excellent frame rate if you want to use and make slow motion. And so, but I don't have that gear. My gear is, you know, 1 or 2 generations ago, 2 generations or more even. I use the A7 III and the A7 IIIR and the A6500. That camera's like 8 years old. So I can do 120 frames per second, but in 1080. And of course, the other thing about the final output is that's all 420 8-bit. Now, I'm not really worried about that. I have finally conceded that I'm not really going to try and grade my videos really heavily. So I just take all the picture profiles off and I just let the cameras do what they're going to do, and then I might change them around a little bit. Now, having said that, I've just started really back into making videos of some birds. You know, no big deal, just my backyard, you know, where we have the bird feeder. And I wanted to specifically look at bird behaviors, how they push each other out. The bigger birds come in, they push out younger birds and smaller birds and other bird species and that sort of thing. So I wanted to make slow motion, but I want to deliver everything in 4K because it just looks better. But I don't want to pony up, right? If I want to get a really good 4K 120, you're starting at the $3,000 plus range for a camera like that. Now the FX30s come along and that might work, and it's actually on sale right now, great. But I wanted to just use what I have. I kept vacillating. I kept waiting. You know, I kept just waffling on whether I wanted to move forward or not. And I just said, go to work with what you have. That's the best thing you can do. Just make the best work that you can. You just have to think of the workflow, and that's what this is about. So I'm going to bring up some video, and I'm going to show you this first video, and this was what I was looking for. I wanted to get some 4K video of hummingbird, and I put I put my little lav mic down there so I could actually hear his hum. And I wanted to slow it down, but my camera is only capable of 4K 30, which is great. I mean, I'm not complaining. That's a beautiful picture for what it is, 4208 8-bit. It's still gorgeous. We've come a long way. So the problem is, how do I turn that into a slow motion video? Because I'm only at 30 frames per second, and that's the problem. So you have to, but this first video is what I ended up with at 4K 30. I put it into Topaz Video AI, and I slowed it down by 4 times. So that's kind of the target number for this for the entirety of this video. I'm trying to look at only 4 times slow motion. So, if I'm at 120, I slow it down to 30. And that's kind of the target. So let me show you this first video, and I'm going to tell you the issues with it as it goes along. Now, just as a side note, the sound I had to dub in there later and everything to make it. Well, let me just say this. None of these videos, I don't care about focus. I don't even care that much about light. I just want to see what the slow motion results were. I wasn't concerned about a lot of different things, and that's very obvious when you see this. So when you see it and you're appalled at the lighting or whatever, I really didn't care much about it. I just wanted to see what I could get. So this is the clip that I used for at 4K, 30 frames per second, and that was with my A7R III, which is a great video camera. I'm really loving the picture I get out of it. And in my mind, there's just a little bit unnatural in this. It just looks a little unnatural, and you can't really get away from that. You know it's slow motion because these birds move much faster than this. Their body movements are pretty good because their bodies are kind of, they stay still, but their wings are flapping so quickly that the AI only has mostly the blur to work with. So I'm shooting at 1/60th of a second in here, or 1/60th. So I'm not getting a lot of detail. It looks a little weird because the wings are still very blurry, like it's at full speed, but the bodies are slow motion. So I kept thinking there's got to be something in between. And I tried shooting 1080 at 120, and I had Topaz AI render the whole thing. I upscaled it, and I upscaled it to 4K, and I slowed it down as well. And I tried that a few times, and I'll just say I really wasn't happy with the results compared to what I ended up with, and that's what I want to show you. And what I ended up with was I went into Vegas Pro 20. I'm still behind a little bit. I'm at Vegas Pro 20. And Vegas is a beautiful program for this kind of thing. It's always been very intuitive. I love that product. I can just drag and drop stuff on there and just cut them up and do whatever, extend them. And what you can do in Vegas Pro, and let me show you what I do here. So the first thing I do is I review my video, right? So I'm looking for a moment, and it could just be a bird flying away. It could be 2 birds maybe fighting, or something like that. Those are the things I'm looking for slow motion. So I shot this, I reviewed this clip here, And basically it's just a bird taking a bath, right? So what's going to happen? Well, maybe another bird will kick it out, or maybe it'll just fly away, which is what happened. And so the important thing here is that I recorded it at 120, 1080, and I was able to stretch. You're able to stretch it yourself in Vegas Pro 20 or all the Vegas Pro editing, as far as I know. I've been using them for a long time, and it's really easy. And I'll just show you how you do it. You go in, you open up your file in Vegas Pro, you select it, and because I've previewed it, I know where I want to clip it. Now there's a couple of ways of doing it, but in this case I knew where I wanted to clip it, so I kind of just send my cursor there and find where I want to start and end the clip. And once I've done that, I drag it back to the beginning because I like working from that spot. And then you press the Control key if you're working on Windows. And then you use your cursor, and you can see right here, there's a squiggly line inside the frame. And you can see that if I drag it out, I'm going to drag it out to however far I want. And it can go pretty far. And you can probably go like 6 or 8 times if you want, but 4 times looks pretty good still. It still doesn't, it just doesn't look too fake. I'll just put it like that. It looks worse fake if you go too long. So, if this clip was 4 seconds and I just drew it out, 4 times 4 is 16, or 4 times 3 is 12 seconds. You just drag it out to that, and then you render it. And for a 12-second video in 1080, even with the slow motion and no other edits, it's probably only going to take a few seconds to do. That's the first thing I do. So I take away the slow motion part of it from Topaz AI, and I just do it before I ever get there. And then I send it over to Topaz. I open up Topaz, I drop it onto Topaz, and then and this is just me not doing anything other than selecting a 2 times upscale from where it is, which is 1080. So we're going to upscale it to 4K 2160, and then it just it might take up to a minute if it's a longer clip, if it's 15 seconds or something. But these shorter clips, it might take 10 or 20 seconds. It's not very long. And the result looks like this. And it looks pretty good at 120 frames per second. It still doesn't look, it's kind of jittery looking. It's kind of funky looking. It's not that smooth flowing that you would probably get from 1,000 frames per second or something like that. But it's much slower, and it adds impact because the viewer doesn't have to have supersonic eyesight to see these things happening. It's all slowed down for them. So that's my final recommendation. However, that's a worst case scenario for birds, right? Because hummingbirds, their wings are rattling off at 60, 70 beats a second. So what about slower flying birds? And so that's kind of what I did here with these next clips. And you can make up your own mind. These first clips were all in 1080 at 60 frames, and then upscaled. And I stretched them in Vegas, and then I upscaled them to 4K in Topaz, and they came out looking great. The upscale that they do on that is so wonderful. The T-tails become even brighter. It just looks better. I don't know why. Even on I don't have a 1080 screen here, but even on that screen it looks better. And so my big question is, if I was shooting at 60 frames a second, would it look better or as good as if I was shooting at 120 frames per second, 1080, and upscaling and doing all that stuff, so I could save a little file size. And after all of my experiments, I figured just leave it at 120. Just don't think about it. Doesn't matter what bird it is, just put it on 120 frames per second. The file sizes aren't that much bigger, I didn't think, and it didn't save me a whole bunch of time. And perhaps if I was working on some kind of gigantic program or something, I might consider thinking that far into it, but I would rather keep it simple and stay at 120 frames per second when I'm thinking I'm going to want some slow motion in here. Because you can tell when birds start coming together, especially if there's multiple birds, there's going to be a row, because the stronger birds always enforce their dominance, and they're always doing things to go after the less dominant birds. Or if there's multiple species, they really start getting into it. And those are the kinds of interactions that are just so cool to get and put into slow motion. So here are the clips, and we're going to start in 60 frames per second at 1080, and they're upscaled to 4K, and they're slowed down to 4 times their natural speed. They're 4 times as slow. So when we get to the 120 frames, I'll let you know. And some of these are marked and some of them aren't. I just got tired of labeling all of them. It was just like, I'll just let you know. So these first are going to be at 60 frames per second and 1080 upscaled. And then I'll let you know. The following clips are going to be originally shot in 120 frames per second at 1080, and they're upscaled to 4K and slowed down to 4 times slower than their original 120. They're slowed down to 30 frames per second. Okay, that's it. Now, I really felt like I was going to say something about these clips as they were playing, but I felt like you just be the judge yourself. You decide what you might want to do. If you're like me, and you don't have bank to just plunk down on new cameras every time they come out, and believe me, I'm really looking at the FX30. I'm thinking about it because of the 4K 120, and I know there are other cameras that do it, but there's a lot of other things about the system that I could use it for other than that, for like lenses and things like that that I already have that won't work on other cameras. But if you're like me and you have to have a different little workflow to get around these things and still deliver up in 4K and make it have a higher quality than 1080, 1080 is great, believe me. There's nothing wrong with 1080. But my final analysis is to just stay at 120 and just go from there, or get a camera that does 4K 120, and then you don't have to go through that extra step. Let me know what you think. And thank you for listening, and just keep shooting. And if you want to do video, man, get into that too. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot more work, but it's a lot of fun as well. Thank you. See you later.